Stalin during the Great Patriotic War, according to many historical reports, was calculating in cold-blooded. He understood that the victory in the war is not only the merit of the front. He worked out an ideology, one of the foundations of victory, which many people underestimate. And it should not be forgotten, as well as Operation Great Waltz. The latter was even described by the Germans themselves. The objectives of the Great Waltz operation. The year of 1944 was going on. The victory was close and obvious. The military spirit rose. The Soviet army managed to return Belorussia, the Baltics and eastern Poland, where hard, but nevertheless the fascists were defeated. Their losses were in the hundreds of thousands. 21 generals were captured by the Soviets. A lot of equipment was captured. The Allies did not believe that the Soviet Union managed to push the Nazis back. Everyone believed that the numbers were made up. Hitler also tried his best to influence the information field, using various tricks. For example, other units were given the numbers of those defeated by the Red Army as if nothing had happened. Then our superiors had to go another way. It was to develop a special operation, and it was called the Great Waltz. It was based on Hitler's captured soldiers and officers. They were to walk as prisoners of war through the streets of Moscow. The name of the operation was suggested by Lavrentiy Beria. A Hollywood movie of the same name was popular in those years. Joseph Vissarionovich supported the proposal. Let them look at the picture performed by the USSR. By the way, the operation was necessary. Despite the fact that victory was near and the Soviet Union had really advanced in the war effort, there were a lot of casualties. And the civilians needed faith more than ever. After all, so much had to be borne on their shoulders. 2. Participants of the parade. On July 17, 1944, there was an anti-parade. In any case, Hitler's soldiers were literally selected for it, and all the details were classified. Thus, more than 57,000 people were taken from the camps from the towns of Bobruisk and Vitebsk, Belarus. Just think about these figures: more than 50,000 prisoners of fascists. They were guarded by personnel of special NKVD troops. Among those 57,000 were generals. As many as 19 generals, who once commanded very successful units, but by then completely defeated. German soldiers thought that their hour had come and they would be driven to Siberia to die, where they would freeze and starve to death. Why, then, the day before, they had been given a hearty meal of porridge, bacon, and bread. The prisoners of war were placed in the Dynamo Stadium, and those who did not fit in went to the city's hippodrome. They had to march in 2 large groups. The purpose was to repeat the rotation from the waltz, to emphasize the name of the operation. As a circle they chose the Garden Ring. The first group, about 42,000 prisoners of war Germans, marched from Gorky Street, then along Sadovoy Street and to Kursky Station. Their direction was like the movement of the clock hand. The heads of this procession were the Wehrmacht commanders, then the officers, and then the ordinary privates. It took them little more than 2.5 hours to cover the entire route. The second group had about 15,000 people. They were also marching along Gorky, then came out to Sadovoy, but headed in the opposite direction to the first group in the direction of Konachikovo Station, District Railway. It took more than 4 hours for the latter group to march. At the end of the operation, the Great Waltz, there were sprinklers. And not just for fun. It was necessary for sanitary reasons. The fact is that the POWs were not allowed to stop and they were literally walking under themselves. And it was easy to explain why they could not stand it for 2.5 to 4 hours. They had to be fed beforehand, so they would have the strength for the most spectacular waltz-like march through of their lives in Moscow. Their stomachs simply couldn't take that much greasy food. Among other things, washing the streets was also perceived as washing the Nazis off the face of the USSR. From the recollections of a German soldier, everyone was a soldier, and just following the orders of the convoy, Brown recalled. We were looking at the Russians. They were looking at us, and everyone thought of worse things happening in war than that infamous Grand Waltz. There were no excesses from the civilians watching the march. All that could be heard was the shouting of Hitler and the Nazis in general, with only one prefix of the word death, and the contempt for these subhuman beings in the eyes of every civilian.